there's one network doing something good. Have you caught the grief that NPR, or the NPR drama of these past few days?
Of course I am. We talked about it yesterday. And this new CEO, she's a piece of work, man. She is a piece of work. She gave a big statement about how the First Amendment has to be fought. Listen, the biggest lie ever told is that the left is tolerant. They are the most intolerant bunch of babies that ever lived on the planet Earth. And here's a guy who I guess he sort of went off the reservation, editor for 25 years.
Uri Berliner.
He wrote a piece and he said, look, there's a liberal bias here. There's a leftist bias. They suspended him. They punished him.
And then he quit.
And then he resigned. And he said, sorry, I can't work in a place where the CEO obviously has such hostility. Yeah, good for him. But on the other hand, why are we paying one dime?
Well, there you are. And so NPR, for everybody who doesn't know, is part of the public broadcasting, and it gets about $500 million of our taxpayer dollars.
Ridiculous.
Which I know is lunch money against the federal budget, but it's a half a bill that could go to something. And if NPR wants to be liberal,
it's the size of the Trump fine against in the city of New York.
That's context. That's valuable context. Exactly right. And if they and listen, total full disclosure, there's stuff that NPR does that I think is superb. Fresh Air with Terry Gross, This American Life, Wait, Don't Tell Me. There's things they do that great, but when they cover news stuff and in their morning shows and afternoon shows, it is poisonous liberal Democrat talking points, which, by the way, they have every right to do. But we don't have to pay for it. We should not have a dime going to this. And don't you think that in the Hamptons alone, there's enough money to keep NPR afloat? For 10 years. So let's get off the public dole and let NPR do whatever they want to do and do it as a public business.
The good news is this whole drama has put a new unwanted spotlight on them and this taxpayer funding. And you got some, I think Senator Marsha Blackburn and others are renewing their vigorous attempt to defund the NPR.
Finally, a defund movement conservatives can get behind.
Seriously, what's the argument for funding them?
Well, I'll tell you what it's historically been, is that the rest of broadcasting, like, I don't know, us, and every other radio station that you're probably listening to, music, talk, and everything in between, is subject to market forces and what advertisers want and the public whims of the moment, whereas public broadcasting is supposed to be there to offer up things that are objectively good and enriching, irrespective of markmarketplace whim.
The Mark Davis show is objectively good. The Mike Gallagher show is objectively good.
Yes, it is.
I mean, there's no argument to defend funding them with taxpayer dollars.
No, of course not.
Progressives wouldn't fund you or me. And yet, can you imagine taxpayer dollars from lefties going to the Mike Gallagher show or the Mark Davis show or to 660 AM The Answer? They'd lose their minds. And so now that we do know there's a leftist bias, and it's inexcusable that we must defund NPR. You're right. $500 million in the scheme of things isn't a lot of money, but it's not nothing.
Counts.
Every little bit.
And listen, every once in a while, and I will watch a Morning Joe segment, but just to know what these people are doing. And the bias on NPR is not just, hey, here's why Trump's the devil, or hey, here's why your SUV is making the planet warmer. Sometimes it is sort of a curveball. They started up, I'm Steve Inskeep, I'm Leila Falden, and our next focus.
Well, you know way too much about NPR.
is on our next story is about doxing, and I thought, oh, okay. And of course, doxing is when somebody's name and personal info is put out there ostensibly to be weaponized so that terrible things happen. And okay, so here's the story of someone who was doxed. And I'm like, okay, I'm in. I'm fascinated by this horrible social media phenomenon. It's also kind of legal because it tends to be stuff that's public information. So, okay, let's see what this is. You know who the victim was? The empathetic, sympathetic victim was of doxing, Mike? It was someone who is captured on video ripping a poster off a lamppost in New York of a hostage, of a Hamas-held hostage. This Jew-hating, anti-Semite, Hamas-loving woman was captured on video, and they said, hey, here's a woman ripping a child's picture down because she loves Hamas, and she wound up losing her job. catching some online hell. Imagine that. And they went to her. It's like, it was terrible what happened to me. I can't believe that just by, and she understands that, okay, maybe I shouldn't have brought the poster down. But what happened to me was disproportionate. Look at the victim. How many doxing victims could you find? And they went and found her.
That's who they found. I mean, I love it. I love it when the old FAFO rule comes into effect.
Blanked around and found out.
I'll clean it up. Fart around and find out.
Yeah,
and here's
buddy.
Here's a fart around and find out victim or exhibitor. The young woman who stood up before the Bakersfield, California City Council, and she was livid because they weren't sufficiently supportive of Hamas or the Palestinians or Gaza.
What'd she tell them?
We're going to murder you all.
Right.
And she was so cocky.
She did a mic drop. We're going to murder you all. And
we're going to murder you all.
Off.
And then twice, and two different parts of her speech.
Which is a crime. Which is a crime to do that,
well,
of course.
Next day, that's what, she's in handcuffs in front of the court, crying and sobbing because now they're charging her with about a gazillion felonies because she threatened the lives. And watching her weep, I'm ashamed of myself, but I took great joy in that because you know what? Hey, actions have consequences.
They do. At least she got punished. In Garland, there were 23 pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protesters blocking entry into a contractor's a parking lot, and those 23 people got arrested. And now the Palestinian local Garland, Texas Palestinian activists are saying, drop the charges. You need to drop the charges.
Yeah.
Shoot, no, we're not dropping the charges. And if we talked about Tom Cotton's suggestion that if they block a bridge, throw them into the river.
Yeah, get it. We'll take care of it Arkansas way.
Last
we don't mess around with
protest,
that in Arkansas.
final protest if that starts happening.
Well, there are deadly consequences to actions. As we know, the Senate, no surprise, immediately struck down the effort to impeach Alejandro Mayorkas.
Yep.
But here's a real tragic story out of Nevada where, again, actions have deadly, deadly consequences. One of the Democrats, one of the senators who has been railing against any effort to impeach Mayorkas, who's been railing against any concerns about the border, is a Democrat Senator Catherine Cortez Masto. She's been telling reporters, there's no evidence that the border is open. The border is just fine. Her top aide, her chief aide, was a guy by the name of Kurt Engelhardt. He was a senior advisor. Oh, yeah, was, because now an 18-year-old illegal has been arrested in connection to his death.
Oh, no.
Yep. On April 6th, 4:30 in the morning, 18-year-old involved in a two-vehicle crash that killed Engelhardt. He was beloved. He was Senator Cortez Masto's top advisor, and now he's dead, and they're burying him, and an illegal immigrant has been jailed for the death.
Do you think that will bring clarity to the senator and others like her?
It should. It should. I mean, I really struggle with wondering if the people, for example, who have the Trump derangement syndrome can be won over. I've had a couple of really fiery arguments this week with people who, Trump's an insurrectionist, and I've been thinking about your prayer. I'm going to really take your morning prayer to heart, where people of goodwill and good faith can have a dialogue, essentially. And I want to try to do that to see if any of these people who are so blindingly rage-filled with Donald Trump can recognize how awful this lawfare is and how one day it can be used against them or the Democrat of their choice. This is such an egregious example of an abuse of power. It's an Bill Barr, of all people, who's no big Trump fan, used the right word, Mark. It's an abomination. Yes. Look at the side-by-side images of Trump in a courtroom and Biden on the campaign trail. And yesterday, Biden actually taunted Trump and said, my political opponent is a little busy these days. Ha, ha, ha. I mean, he's so cocky, he can't even hide the real agenda here. And the agenda here is to hobble the Trump candidacy while Biden is now campaigning. And incidentally, what an opposite optic from 2020, where he hid in the basement, never left Wilmington, went once in a while to a parking lot with 7 cars weekly honking their horns. Oh, yeah, he got 81 million votes, my
Of course
butt.
he did.
But anyway, now he's campaigning. And so everything is different. And Biden is he's now wants to impose tariffs on China. Oh, wow. He bashed Trump for doing that when Trump successfully did it. So everything is sort of up on its axis. I want to tell you a personal story about an event I was invited to, because it gets back to whether or not we can change the hearts and minds of people who hate Trump. I'm especially fixated on so-called Republicans who hate Trump. I was invited to an event, and on the panel was going to be one of the famous Republican never-Trumpers.
Yeah.
Now I said, excuse me, how's that going to work?
Yeah.
There's 4 of us on the panel. 3 of us understand the essential need to get Trump reelected. We know that the country's at stake. We know that the whole future of this experiment hangs in the balance. Honestly, how does it work to have a Republican who has bashed Trump incessantly?
Yeah.
I mean, you got an audience of 1,000 people, 1,500 people. Right. Seriously, Mark, if you're planning that event, would you put a Republican never-Trumper on the panel?
If I'm planning it and it's like, hey, let's have some fun here with differences of opinion, every day I'd put that person on the panel. However, if it's kind of, I mean, who's doing the event, if I may ask?
I'd rather not get into it because I don't want to embarrass anybody. But the event was. But let me answer your question.
If it is, then if it's like a Salem event, if it's us, I wouldn't, because I don't want to put. I necessarily want to put. I mean, I don't. Not that everything needs to be rah rah. You know, everybody's singing from the same hymnal necessarily. But all that's going to do, is just piss people off.
The event is billed as taking back the White House.
Oh,
the event
dude.
The whole event is about how. So then how do you put somebody who doesn't like Trump on a panel? Because you're right. You're going to have people booing this person off the stage.
It won't work well for the person at all.
Or the event. Or us. I don't want to get into a knockdown drag out with a so-called colleague. And this would have been a colleague. Incidentally, the cooler heads prevailed, and the person has been disinvited.
No, so everybody knows, I think we just made clear that if it's just an objective, here's a bunch of Republican opinions, and we're going to save one slot for the Republicans who hate Trump, you bet there's something noble in that. And everybody just comes in, it's like, okay, this could be fun. But if it is kind of a rally, and again, what's it called? As you said, taking back the White House. Exactly. If you have somebody on the stage who's not interested in taking back the White House, that's a bit of a non-starter.
Well, but what is their plan B? What if
they don't have one? It's to hate on him, and that's why when you invoke the prayer, listen, I'm the guy who does the prayer, so I appreciate so much your spirit in going into this and emulating that notion of goodwill. But if you're bringing goodwill, a desire to hear their argument, offer goodwill, offer a respectful ear, but they don't have goodwill because all they just do is hate him, and they're willing to sacrifice every conservative thing they supposedly stand for in order to hate on Trump, then that goodwill connection just ain't going to be made.
But I'm not asking that rhetorically. If their plan is to hate on Trump, they want 4 more years of Biden?
Yes.
They want 4 more years of open borders?
They don't mind it because their hatred of Trump is more important than all those things, because gather all of these never-Trumpers, all of them, and they share something in common, and that is some degree of liberalism, or at least friendliness of and tolerance toward liberalism. There are no real conservatives who are in the never-Trump. There are no actual stalwart, steadfast conservatives in that movement.
They don't exist. You can't be. And that brings us to Mike Johnson, because right now Joe Biden has warmed up to Speaker Johnson's plan to fund Ukraine. And I got to tell you something. I'm between a rock and a hard place on this one, because I don't want the chaos months before the general election. But Mark, I understand the pushback.
I do too.
I get it. I mean, we got America's on fire, and we're supposed to fund Ukraine?
Thank you,
Mark. I mean, what? But it kills me because, and I'm going to try to tackle this on the air today, and wish me luck. Say another prayer for me, because I'm going to need it. But let me end with good news. I'm going to be in South Carolina this weekend.
Yes.
And I found out that President Trump is going to have a rally in Wilmington, North Carolina. Yes. Well, guess who's going? I'm going to go. And you know where I'm going?
Excellent.
I'll do some videos from there on our YouTube channel. Subscribe to that. But you know what? I'm going for one reason. I'm not going as a broadcaster. I'm not going as a talk show host.
Going as an American?
I'm going as an American citizen who knows how much support this guy has to have. We
And listen,
got to
that's
rally
a
behind
heavy
this guy.
military. It's right by Fayetteville, right by Fort Bragg. Wilmington's out on it's a beautiful community. You're going to have the best time. When is that? When is it?
I've even chartered a plane for the occasion. Now that's, I mean, forget Delta. I'm on a little jet to go over to Wilmington. It's Saturday night, and I'm very excited. And the guy that helped me get there, incidentally, is going to be on the show today. You may have heard of Dr. G. Sebastian Gorka is going to join us at 10:35.
Fantastic. So good.
Big
so
weekend
good.
ahead. So, all right, see you tomorrow morning, my friend.
Fantastic. We are ready. And then, boy, I can't wait for Monday, 7:35, because Mike will have stories.